Hi, I'm Angie Beto, and welcome back to Town Talk as we continue our discussion with Cody Cunningham, Chief Communications Officer for McKinney Independent School District. Cody, thanks again for coming back and continuing our conversation, which I think is important for our readers to know what's going on with our upcoming $191 million bond. That's a lot of money.
It is, and one thing that I've said in the public, we've done, I don't know, somewhere between probably 60 and 80 presentations in the community.
Right.
And the reason we're doing that is we really feel strongly that if we can't answer the tough questions, then we don't expect people to get out there and vote or to support this measure. At the end of the day, the community has to decide. It's not our place to decide, but we do have an obligation to provide the information and be able to answer the tough questions. You're
educating us at this point in time. During our last discussion, you explained a little bit about what the bond funding was going to go toward, if that indeed passes. And one of those pieces is the expansion of McKinney North and McKinney High School.
Right.
Particularly, I know McKinney High needs some updating dramatically. Would you address that? Plus, would you address why the district has decided to go for expansion versus building another new high school?
Well, I guess the first thing to address there is, what's driving the expansions, and that's that, while growth has certainly slowed down in McKinney, we're still considered a fast growth district.
Absolutely.
We've added 1,000 new students each year for the last 5 years. We predict that we're going to add somewhere between 500 and 700 new students each year for the next 5 years. But I think to go back to the high schools, one of the most interesting aspects of this growth is that some of the most significant growth in our district is going to be at the high school level. We're looking at adding over 1,300 new students in our high schools over the next 5 years.
Amazing.
It is, and it's interesting if you talk to our teachers and parents who have middle school kids, they'll tell you, yeah, we already knew that, because our middle schools are really large and we have some really large grade levels there. What we're seeing is that it's obviously much more fiscally viable for us to add on to our existing high schools, middle schools and elementaries too, as opposed to constructing a new facility. We looked at the possibility of building a fourth high school. It wasn't even a financially viable option. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think while, there are some people who would love to have smaller schools, and we would too. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But that doesn't mean we can't create a great environment in the schools that we have. This bond would essentially bring McKinney North and McKinney High School up to the same size as McKinney Boyd.
Okay.
It would also totally transform McKinney High School. Most people feel, and some people feel like McKinney High's been a little bit neglected, and really it was never intentional. The reason was that we were building new schools every year, and we had to use our bonding capacity for that versus renovating McKinney High. Now, because we've had a little slowdown in growth, we have an opportunity to go back, do those renovations, and modernize the school, and I think that's something that that's really interesting and probably exciting to a lot of our parents.
So that it's their turn.
Absolutely.
At McKinney High.
And at the end of the day, whether it's elementary or middle or high, we feel like that students should have the same opportunities to have access to the same facilities, resources, and we try as best we can to create that equity across the district. Doesn't mean that you can make a 40 or 50-year-old school look like a school that was built 5 years ago. But we can go back and bring up some of those classrooms, bring up some of those core areas to a standard that's certainly upgraded from where they currently are.
Okay, so as you're talking in the community, discussing the expansion of those two high schools, what's the biggest concern you're hearing from parents?
I think, the biggest concern we're hearing continues to be, when did McKinney ISD decide to shift from philosophies and the size of schools?
Right.
And my response to that is our philosophy never changed about our desire to have small schools. It was always driven by the economy. It was always driven by our financial resources. We don't have the tax base right now. We don't have the bonding capacity to support those smaller schools. Many people know that earlier this year, Frisco ISD announced they're going to expand their high schools.
Right.
They were at 1,800 to 1,900 students, now going up to 2,200 to 2,400. In fact, Centennial and quite a few of those other high schools, they've already added on to them. And that's why they did that. I think we're still hearing some concerns about the size of the schools, but I try to reassure parents this way. At the end of the day, you can put bad teachers in a really small school, and it doesn't necessarily create a great learning environment for kids. You can put excellent teachers and excellent leaders in a large school and still create a great environment for them. It's all about the culture that you create in that school. It certainly takes more relationship building with the teachers,
right.
And so we're aware of that, and we're going to really try to work on that as we do enlarge those campuses.
I heard your presentation a few weeks ago about the bond issue and this discussion about the size of the schools and that philosophy, and one of the comments you made was you had asked a lot of the parents if they had students at Boyd, and
right.
You said to them, how many of you would not want your child to be at Boyd, and no one raised their hand.
Right.
So
well,
that was very telling.
I think it is, and we have given the opportunity for people to transfer out of Boyd. While some students took advantage of that because they wanted a smaller environment, the vast majority didn't. I think that we can replicate that sense of school pride that a lot of our parents and kids have for Boyd at McKinney High, McKinney North. I think it's already there, but building a different facility, expanding it, I don't think it necessarily dilutes the school pride. I think we can. That really, at the end of the day, comes down to leadership.
Sure.
It comes down to your faculty, and so we feel like that concern can be addressed.
So. Let's talk about the benefits and break it down a little bit as far as what in dollar value does this mean to our taxes for our citizens, and what is the benefit to our citizens to vote yes on this bond issue?
Yeah, let me answer the impact first, and then I'll address the second. The second one's a little trickier. The first question is, what does it cost me? Right. That's always the question. Especially in these economic times. I mean, it's a legitimate question.
We want to know.
Absolutely. What is going to be included, and how much is it going to cost me? I guess the first thing is that if you're 65 or older, you can apply for a tax freeze. It wouldn't cost you any more than you're paying now. On a home valued at $150,000, it would be about $1.35 a month. On a home valued at $200,000, it would be about $1.85 a month. And a home valued at $300,000, it would cost that homeowner about $2.85 a month.
Wow, so in reality, that's less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
That's one way to look at it.
Depending on what you get.
Depending on what you get, absolutely. That's one way to look at it. I think that when you see that $191 million, sometimes it's sticker shock.
Yes, we freak out.
Yeah, and justifiably, but I think you always have to look at the size of the community, and you distribute that across the entire population. What does that mean to the individual homeowner? And that's one thing that we're trying to communicate to the public. Understand what's included, but also understand the impact. And then at the end of the day, you can really honestly decide if you feel like that $1.85 or $2.85 a month is worth it. If people feel like it's not worth it, they can get out there and vote no. If they feel like it is, then they'll come out and vote yes. At the end of the day, the community has to decide that.
Right. So let's talk a little further about how this benefits our community to get this into action and do the things that we need to do and improve our district.
That's one of the most challenging questions that I can be asked, because as a district employee, I can't actually publicly endorse the bond. I can provide factual information, But I can tell you what some people would say the benefits would be.
Okay.
What some people have told us and what some people out there are communicating would be the benefits. Obviously, as a school district, when we're growing, the kids are coming whether we like it or not.
Right.
And we have basically two options for accommodating these students. We can put them in our facilities and add on to those facilities, or we can purchase portable buildings, because when the students arrive, we have an obligation to have a seat for them and ready for them when they get here. One way to do that is to purchase. It's a legitimate alternative, and that is to purchase portable buildings. I think that one thing that I always point out, though, keep in mind that we would have to use operating funds to pay for those portables. Operating funds pay for salaries, they pay for supplies, utilities, all of those things. So it comes out of a different pot of money than your bond money. It comes out of the pot that you use for everything else.
And those are a lot of things we want and need.
And that's what some people would say. There's certainly that consideration. I think in our community, one of the reasons why people have stated that, and one of the methodology behind determining that McKinney was one of the 5 best places to live, they looked at several things: quality of life, crime, quality of the education, ability or local economy. And so some would say that the quality of your public education does have a significant impact on your community. I think to be fair and honest, and I guess that let me hit the third thing, and then I'll talk about some of the counterpoints, just to be fair. One thing that we've also heard is that we've invested in these facilities. We can either take care of them or we can walk away from them. And when you're talking about infrastructure repairs, electrical upgrades, plumbing, security, roof replacements, HVAC replacements, by most standards, those are nuts and bolts items to take care of, the basic needs of your campuses. So I think, looking at home value or the impact on the community, looking at accommodating student growth in either a school or a portable, looking at being able to use bond funds versus operating funds to pay for some of this. You could never build a school or build the schools that we would need or the additions with your operating funds. There's simply not enough money there. The system wasn't created to do that. Now, opponents, this is just to be fair and talk about some of the concerns we've heard from a few members of the community. One, we have too much debt as it is. That's something we've heard. My response to that concern is, in the past 15 years, we've grown by over 17,000 students. In a 10-year period, from 2000 to 2010, we doubled in student enrollment.
That's enormous.
So most people don't pay cash for their house.
Right.
There's no possible way a school district could pay cash for all of those schools. You borrow money. Now, it's the price of doing business. It is. And so it's the system that we have in place to pay for building schools. So that's something that is a concern, I think, that's come up. Another concern that we've heard is, even though $1.85 or $2.85 is for some a nominal amount of money, some people are opposed to really any tax increase period right now. And what we would ask is that people study the issue, ask the tough questions, and at the end of the day, if they still choose to vote no, by all means they have every right to do so. But we at least would like the opportunity to really explain what's included and be able to answer those questions. And so, I think those are some of the pros and cons that we've heard. And I hope that we're out there enough addressing them, and I've said this, to many people. My kids aren't seeing a lot of me right now, and that's just, it's worth it to provide the information. So I'll go where anybody will have me and talk about it,
So you kind of answered my last question. The downside of, if we don't get this passed, is we're probably looking at portables, and interestingly enough, we have the situation of not if we build it, they will come. They're going to come anyway.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of downside if we are not able to pass the bond. It sounds like.
You know, I think the portables is one aspect. We when asked, you know, what will happen if it doesn't pass, one of the things that our real simple answer is the projects that you see, they won't happen. So some people may view that as a positive, some people may view it as a negative, but the real simple answer is the security projects, the technology projects, the expansions, McKinney High, McKinney North, pretty much all the renovations, the additions, they just won't happen because there's no money to pay for that.
Right.
And our operating funds, by the way, we're looking at probably $15 to $20 million in cuts this year. That's that we know of, and then an additional 15 or more next year. And so, you know, I think again at the end of the day, it's not our place to convince people one way or the other. It is our responsibility to be very transparent, to talk
facts.
Right, and that's why, you know, we've sent some information out there. We've talked about it in the public as much as we can, and one of the things that I talk about is this is going to impact your taxes. Now, at the end of the day, you have to decide whether that impact is worth it to you or not for the projects included, and then go out and do what you feel like you need to do. You know?
Okay, well, thank you. In summary, is there anything else you would like to share with our readers?
You know, I think that it's a difficult time right now for public education.
Yes, it sure is.
It's a challenging time for us, but that said, I can't imagine being in a community more supportive of our school system. I think, and I'm not talking about the bond, I'm talking about just being involved in our schools. I mean, we're in much better shape than a lot of school districts. Financially, we're in much better shape. As far as business and community support for our schools, I think we're in much better shape. You know, we have over 400 mentors in our campuses, and I think that speaks, you know, very well of our community and you know how much they value education. You know, it's a good place to be during a very difficult time.
Yes, it is.
You know.
Yes. Well, thanks again for joining us. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Angie.
your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us with Town Talk. I'd like to encourage you to post your comments and questions. I know we can come back and get answers for you. If you have further questions, post your comments at the end of the story. Also, don't forget to click on the video that MISD has shared with us so that we can provide extra information for you if you're looking for further answers, or you can check at McKinney ISD's website.